Hi friends, it's Gloria of Golden Bucket Farm. Welcome to my channel. This is the audio version of my blog post number 7. There is a link to my blog just below in the description box. This is a little longer blog, so maybe you want to grab yourself a beverage and settle in to either listen or read. And now, on to whatever became of Blacky's blanket. This is a picture of my great-grandparents on their wedding day in 1889. They went on to have 9 children, some of whom are in this story. Like blog post number 6, the story of the Rogue Ring, this tale deals with a mysterious disappearance. From beginning to end, we will travel back through time over 100 years and then forward again 65 years or so. It was a snowy day in the early 1900s. Great-grandpa was away for the day with his older brother, working at their wintertime occupation as cabinet makers. Great-grandma was in the big farmhouse kitchen, busy with Christmas baking, Lebkuchen, Pfeffernusse, and Stollen. Though she had most holiday preparations well in hand, there were still items on her shopping list. Along with a number of other needs, there were a box of little candles for the Christmas tree, anise seeds for the springly, and ribbon to make new hair bows for her 3 young daughters. Great-grandma called 2 of her older sons and sent them to the barn to bring out the cutter and hitch up the horses for a trip to town. The boys gave each other knowing glances and went out whistling. Great-grandma had soapstone foot warmers heating on the cook stove. When the 3 little sisters saw what was happening, they ran to their mother. "Oh, Mama, may we please go with the boys to town? We've not been for ever so long," begged the eldest. "We promise to be good and not ask to buy anything," chimed in the middle sister. Pretty, please," chirped the youngest as she bobbed up and down in excitement. Great-grandma smiled at her 3 girls. Secretly, she may have been thinking how nice and quiet the house would be when her youngest son went down for his nap, and with the 3 chatterboxes gone to town with their brothers. "Yes, my dears," she said, "I think that would be a most excellent idea. Since I have hair bow ribbon on the list, each of you may pick out a yard in whatever color you like best. Now hurry and get your warmest things out. Here come the boys, back from the barn and almost ready to leave." Great-grandma told the boys to get into the big blanket box and take out 2 heavy ones for themselves and Blacky's blanket for their sisters who would be accompanying them on their errand. The fellows looked at each other, their faces fell. Peeved as they were at hearing this turn of events, they knew better than to question their mother's decision. Here they had been picturing themselves as young men about town, with their father's flashy team and 2-seated cutter, perhaps being able to take a detour around the section and show off a bit to their neighbors' pretty daughters. Who knew but that the young ladies might even be allowed to go with them on their journey? But no. Now they would have to go straight to town and back again in short order, all the while having their painty little sisters in tow. While the girls donned their winter outerwear, their mother wrapped the foot warmers in pieces of old blanket and put each into a gunny sack. Throwing a shawl around her shoulders, she stepped out onto the back porch as her glowering sons helped their sisters into the back seat of the sleigh, putting the wrapped foot warmers under their feet and tucking Blacky's blanket securely in around them. As the two brothers swung themselves up in front and prepared to depart, Great-Grandma called out to them with a warning about Blacky's blanket. "See you take good care of that blanket. You know how special it is to your father. Don't let anything happen to it. When you get to the store, either take it inside with you, or one of you stay out to keep an eye on it. If someone snatched it, you know we could never replace it. Drive safely and have a good trip." They nodded their heads in acknowledgement, all the while smarting inside about how their day was turning out. Little did they know then, but that things would soon go from bad to worse. They clucked up the team and swooshed out of the yard with sleigh bells and their mother's admonition ringing in their ears. It is at this point I feel obliged to interject myself into the story and answer the two questions you may be asking. Just who is this Blacky, and what is the deal about his blanket? Blacky was a horse, a handsome Percheron, black in color, of course. Great-Grandpa loved Blacky dearly. They had a special bond, that man and that horse. When Blacky eventually died at 20-something years of age, Great-Grandpa just could not let him go. He had a big sleigh blanket made from his gleaming hide, lined with the warmest wool of sky blue. That blanket was a memorial to Blacky, a shining testament to what a great horse he had been. Now you know the reason for Great-Grandma's concern. In this day and time, it may seem strange that anyone would want a blanket made from the hide of their dead horse. But then again, there are those who have mounted deer heads, fish, or bear skins hanging on the walls of their homes. They never really knew these animals, not like Great-Grandpa knew Blacky, and he was not alone in his feelings. If you look online for vintage horsehair sleigh blankets, you can often find them for sale even yet. Plus, considering the waste not, want not mentality of the past, horsehide made a warm, durable, waterproof covering for people just as it had for the horse. And now, back to the story. When the family got to town, the boys pulled up in front of the general store on Main Street. Still feeling stompy and grumpy, they quickly alighted from the cutter and trudged up the steps of the store, never giving a backward glance at their sisters. They just wanted to be finished and done with the shopping as fast as possible. "Hey, come back! What about us?" the girls cried after them. "You stay there in the sleigh. We won't be long. Just be glad you got to come to town at all," snapped the younger brother. But Mama said we could pick out ribbons for new hair bows. You have to let us come," wailed the youngest sister, and she began to weep. "Oh, stop your blubbering then. Come on in and let's get this trip over with," grouched the older of the brothers. With that, the three sisters happily threw off Blacky's blanket, jumped down from the cutter, ran up the store steps, and the two youngest followed their brothers inside. The eldest daughter, however, remembered her mother's words, looked back worriedly at the beautiful blanket abandoned in the sleigh, and hesitated leaving it. She looked up and down the street. Well, there was no one in sight, at least not close. "I guess we can watch the blanket through the front window of the store," she thought to herself, and made the fatal mistake of leaving Blacky's blanket unguarded. At first, the oldest girl kept one eye on the blanket in the sleigh as she moved around the front part of the store. But soon her sisters called her to come to the back to pick out ribbon for her hair bow. She looked away from the window and became engrossed in selecting just the right color. There were so many pretty ones. At last each girl made her decision. The ribbons were cut and added to the pile of purchases the brothers made, ticking off each item on their mother's list. Finally, everything was wrapped and paid for. The family gathered up their packages and turned toward the door to leave. It is uncertain who was the first to notice, but almost as one, they gave a gasp at what they saw, or rather what they did not see, through the big front store window. As they peered out, hoping against hope that their eyes were deceiving them, all they saw was an empty sleigh. Hurriedly they exited the store, flew down the steps, and frantically began looking in, under, and behind the cutter. But the gorgeous blanket was not there. What their mother had warned against had happened. If they did not take the blanket into the store with them, or leave one or the other of them outside to watch, someone might well snatch their treasure. She was right. Blacky's blanket was gone. What a sad, silent, frightened group of youngsters made the cold trip back from town. What would they tell their mother? How could they face their father? What could they ever do to make up for their self-centered carelessness that resulted in the loss of the family treasure? There really was nothing they could say or do. It was a lesson none of them, from the oldest down to the youngest, ever forgot. I wish I could tell you this part of the story had a happy ending. Perhaps their father and uncle came down Main Street on their way home from work, and seeing the blanket left in the cutter, took it home with them, to teach the young ones a lesson in taking better care of valued possessions. Or perhaps the thief had second thoughts sometime later, and one dark night returned the blanket to the family by hanging it over their yard fence. But sadly, neither of these things happened. However amazing as it seems, this was not the end of the story of Blacky's blanket. Great-grandpa, not many years later, died from complications brought on from a fall off the roof of a barn he was building for another farmer. Great-grandma eventually sold the farm and moved to town, where she too passed away. The brothers and sisters grew up, lived out their lives, and one by one joined their parents and siblings buried in the church cemetery. At last, only one was left, the youngest of the sisters, and she was alone, even her daughter having passed on. My mother was the daughter of the older sister. These two became closer than ever, one missing her mom and one missing her daughter. And so it was that they did many things together, remembering and reminiscing, enjoying each other's company. One thing they did each year was to spend a day at the county fair, just as they had done in earlier times. They worked their way through the exhibit buildings and even visited the animal barns, lingering a bit longer when they came to the percher-on horses. This was a bittersweet part of the tour for Great Auntie, as she remembered old Blacky and the loss of his blanket. The last building they would visit was where examples of heritage crafts were shown and collections of antiques were exhibited. They laughed together about items that had once been part of their everyday lives and now were considered collectible. One particular year, as they were walking slowly along, seeing what there was to see, Great Auntie gave a sudden, sharp gasp. My mother, thinking perhaps the day had been too much for her, looked for a place for Auntie to sit down. "Are you feeling ill?" she asked. "Should I call for help?" "Oh, no," was Auntie's reply. It's just such a shock." Mother looked around, wondering to what Auntie was referring. "What are you talking about, dear? Are you really okay?" I'm fine. But just look there, in the back of that display," she said, pointing across the aisle. Mother looked to where Auntie was pointing, and there, on a rack, hung a large, black, horsehair sleigh blanket lined with sky blue wool. And the old family story of Blacky's blanket came to mind. "Surely," Auntie said, her voice quavering a bit, "after all these years, no, it couldn't be, could it? If I could just feel the hair and the wool, I could maybe tell. Oh, and I remember now, our blanket had a missing corner where it had dragged out of the cutter once and was cut off by the runner. Father was unhappy about that. Mother mended it as best she could. When I close my eyes, I can still see the shape of that odd corner. I sure would like to get a closer look at that blanket." Each antique exhibitor's display was surrounded by a picket fence. There was a narrow gap between displays. Being a small lady, Great Auntie found she could skinny her way sideways between the two fence sections until she got close enough to reach out and touch the blanket. The blanket had the right feel. Then she looked closely at the corner that hung to the back of the rack and closest to the fencing. She turned to my mother smiling, meaning she recognized the shape of the damaged corner. Tears ran down her cheeks as she told Mother that even her mother's tiny mending stitches were still there. Blacky's blanket had been found. "Would you like me to copy the exhibitor's name?" Mother asked, "so we can track him or her down and see if we could buy the blanket back? It would be so wonderful to bring it home again where it belongs. I still can't get over that it was brought to the fair and you were here to see it." Great Auntie sat thinking for a bit, and then she said, "No, I don't want to contact the owner. It was taken so long ago. The family who owns it now obviously is proud to be in possession of such a fine piece of our area's heritage. They have no idea of its history. Who knows how it came to them? I don't want to rake up the past. It is more than enough that the Lord has let me see and touch it again one last time. My mind is at peace. I won't ever again wonder what happened to Blacky's blanket."